Do you want to learn the tricks that top leaders use to get the most out of themselves and their teams? Well, Naftali Hoff is here to help. Lead to succeed. Picks the brains of top leaders to learn about their challenges, insights, and best practices. Here's Naftali.
Hello, Lead to Succeed Nation. It's Naftali Hoff, and welcome to Lead to Succeed, episode 120. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Damon Lembi. For nearly 3 decades, Damon has led Learnit through the ever-changing L&D landscape, gaining insight into what works, how great leaders learn, and why Learnit all companies outpace their competition. Coming to business from a career in baseball, he brings an athlete's perspective on leadership and training to informal mentoring of executives. Damon has distilled those hard-won insights into his best-selling book, the Learnit All Leader Mindset Traits and Tools. Damon, so glad to have you on the show today.
Naftali, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And whatever mistakes I made, the bio is going to have it correct. So let's not worry about it. Let's dive right in.
You're totally fine.
I'm super intrigued, by the way, because a little bit. And I'm a bit under-caffeinated, if I'm being honest. But what's interesting to me is the learning and development. I shared with you before we started recording my background in education. So I'm super excited to learn about that. I also, I was never a professional athlete, but I've been somewhat athletic, some would say, and definitely interested in athletics for a really long time. So the tie-in there is something I'd love to dive into as well. But before we do, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got here, specifically about Learnit, your involvement with the company.
Sure. So my name is Damon Lembi again, and I was born and raised, and I still live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up, I had 4 siblings, and in high school, everything was really about sports in my family, and I was lucky enough to have a great group of friends. By my sophomore year in high school, I realized that if I had a chance to play sports in college, it had to be baseball. That was what I was strongest at. So my senior year, I was lucky enough, I got drafted by the Atlanta Braves, dating myself a little bit here, back in 1990. And I had my first tough decision. Do I go in the minor leagues or do I go to college baseball? I chose college baseball, took a full scholarship to Pepperdine. And I did that because really it was the vision of what the coach had. We're a small school, and it was really one of my first big leadership lessons. He set this moonshot vision and really inspired the team. But I got hurt. It dealt with a little bit of imposter syndrome, and I ended up leaving and ended up playing at Arizona State in the College World Series, which was really exciting, hit a home run, and was ready to continue on in my career in baseball, which is the only thing I thought about for the first 21, 22 years of my life. I didn't get drafted, and here I was kind of at the crossroads. I can continue on independent route, but I was pretty depressed, and it kind of hurt my identity. I was like, I've always been a baseball player. What am I going to do now? And I'm really fortunate to come from a family that of entrepreneurs, and also during that time period up until about 2009, we had one of the largest real estate companies in San Francisco Bay Area, my dad and my grandfather, and we had everything from a mortgage company to a hotel chain to a Chinese restaurant. So I had a lot of different options to go into from a family business perspective, but I kind of lacked the confidence. And I didn't know if my skills were transferable. So I started off as a receptionist at this new business my dad was just starting, Learnit, which is a computer training company. And he started it like a lot of great entrepreneurs. He wanted to solve his own problem. He took a class somewhere. He thought it was ineffective. He thought it was boring and too long. And he said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so this is where he came up with the idea of Learnit. I was really, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, getting out, finishing up with school. And I wanted to start at the ground level. I started off as a receptionist, worked really hard, taught classes, did sales. Fast forward about 7 years, when the CEO wasn't working out and they were looking to change, I kind of threw my hat in the ring and was one of 3 candidates. Had an advantage and got the position. I've been here ever since, and it's been about 28 years, and we've upskilled close to 1.8 million people, maybe even a little bit more. And so it's been a pretty wild and crazy journey. But yeah, really, that's how I got here, and that's what Learnit is, corporate training company.
Well, there's certainly a lot to unpack there. I'm intrigued by the so to speak missed opportunity, where your baseball career derailed. You know, you mentioned Arizona State as a kid. I used to watch the College World Series. I seem to recall Wichita State playing a lot, maybe Arizona State, and hearing all these like ping ping, you know, of the metal bats and the balls flying out of the yard. So that's like my minimal experience with college baseball and the College World Series. But more importantly, it's interesting because here you had put, it seems, all of your eggs in one basket, really invested so much time and effort and assumed that your career would involve at least the next 10, 15, 20 years of it would involve professional baseball. And that didn't happen. And instead of, I mean, maybe there was a small element of a pity party or some sulking or whatever. Those things do happen, but you quickly found a new way forward. Yes, you had certain, let's call it, market advantages with family and whatnot, and something to step right into. But nonetheless, you did go through the process of pivoting and recognizing that option A is no longer an option. It didn't work for you, but I'm going to make something out of myself and I'm going to move this thing forward. And I think when leaders fail, and I'm certainly one of them. You know, I wrote my book, Becoming the New Boss, largely as a result of many failures of myself in the realm of leadership. They oftentimes don't know how to take the next step. And you were young, so maybe it's a little bit different, but maybe you can speak to this since you are dealing with a lot of leaders. You are upskilling, as you said. I don't know how much of it is personal conversations, or maybe they're just taking your courses. So I don't know how intimately you're getting to know these individuals, but what are you seeing specifically? Because I'm going to ask a question later about your own biggest mistake in all of that, but we're already here. So I want to kind of take advantage of it. What do you find is the characteristic, the mindset? What is the special ingredient, if you will, or characteristic of the individuals who fail or who have their doors closed in front of them and yet make a successful pivot, transition to something new, and find a new way forward that really serves them?
That's a great question. And I kind of went through pretty much all of what you spoke about. You know, when my baseball career ended, I had maybe my own internal pity party, and it probably took a couple of years to get completely over it. You know, a lot of the people I played with, a lot of my friends, you know, seeing them after a couple of years getting into the big leagues and going to watch them play, it was tough. But I also said to myself, you know, I'm 22 years old, 23 years old. You know, I have to make this work. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna, what I learned growing up is to be fully committed. I was fully committed. Like you said, I put all my eggs in one basket with baseball. And I said, okay, now it's time to stop feeling sorry for myself and not live in the past, which unfortunately a lot of people do in business, or, you know, when they have failures, they kind of dwell on them. And I said, you know, I'm going to just work hard. I'm going to outwork everybody. And I'm going to do what I do next and be successful with it. And I'm not saying you need to stay at an organization 28 years like I have at Learnit. I mean, that's pretty rare, actually. You know, I have other side, you know, things that I help out with. But I think the important thing, getting back to your question about how do leaders learn how to handle failure and move on, is you got to first be self-aware and understand that, you know, don't play the victim role. See what you, if there's anything you could have done better, you know, learn from what you've done, because there's always learning lessons in there that you can. And that's what my whole book about really is, what I learned playing baseball and through my father, that I incorporated, which I never thought I would, in my business and leadership career moving forward. And so I think it's okay to fail. We've all failed. It's taking those failures and pivoting and just keep moving forward. And give yourself the grace or the space to deal with it and go forward.
Love it. So I'm going to ask a question. I hope it's not overly invasive, but it's something that's sort of in my mind because Tony Robbins, for example, will often talk about, the famous explorer. I'm trying to remember which one it was now that burned the boats,
Yes.
Went down, I think, to conquer the Incas, burned the
Yeah.
boats, and basically told his people,
Yeah.
fight or die. And
Yeah.
ultimately that's how they overcame the massive threat or challenge that was in front of them. And so the idea is not to have a plan B, because
Right.
the moment you have a plan B, your mind already takes the foot off the gas and says, I don't really have to make plan A work because I have this backup plan. So here I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to imagine, I'm a father of kids who are already either into their careers or preparing for their careers. And I'm just imagining if I'm your dad, and again, the reason I said invasive is because I don't want to sit here and have a conversation judging anybody's father or grandfather, but you indicated that you had family businesses and whatnot. And I'm just wondering, from an advisory standpoint, were you advised to go all in on this baseball path? This is your passion, follow your passion. This is what you're good at. And kind of the assumption was you would succeed, or was there this pressure for you to learn entrepreneurship, for you to get familiar with the family businesses, this kind of thing, saying, well, what happens if there's an injury, or what happens if you're not as good as you need it to ultimately be? I'm just curious what that conversation looked like, and whether or not when you were playing baseball, did you actually have a plan B, or were you did you in fact burn your boat, so to speak, go all in on baseball, and that was going to be it?
So to start with the last question, I burned my boat and that was going to be it. That's all I pretty much thought about. Now the question about my father, my family, they were really supportive. You see some of these individuals, people I played with, their parents really pushed them into it, and they said, like, you have to do this, you have to be a baseball player, or you have to go to law school or whatever it is. For me, is they were supportive. They were excited by it, but they were supportive. And after my senior year, when I didn't get drafted and I had an opportunity to play independent ball and I was kind of depressed, I kind of got into it with my dad. He really wanted me to see it through, the whole thing, right? See baseball through, because I put so much effort into it. And he said, you have the rest of your life to work for our family, or go find a career that you want to. So there wasn't really any pressure, and there was more pressure to try to continue on with baseball, which, we had some tough conversations, but I was just kind of, at that point, I was kind of over it, and felt like that independent ball was probably just a distraction for a couple of years. And then that's where I kind of dove in head first in my business career, but I really wanted to start at the bottom and in a smaller business, because I was a little intimidated. Like I said, I was intimidated. I didn't know if these skills were transferable. And I started at this company that was a couple of weeks old, or a week old, and put all my energy into that. And I used it as a great learning opportunity. But it was really fortunate, especially for those parents out there who are listening. I get a lot of parents that come to me all the time and say, hey, I want my kid to be a D1 baseball player like you, get a scholarship and do this and do that. And they have them in all these special coaches, and these coaches telling them their kids are fantastic and they're playing one sport year round. And I'm totally against that. I'm all about being more of a generalist. Let the kid play, let your children play multiple sports. Let them learn how to play different instruments. Let them choose their path and try different things and experiment, instead of try to pigeonhole into one thing. Because, and this goes for, I think, work and leadership too, if you do just focus in and only like I played all kinds of sports growing up, these kids can burn out early. And so it's good to explore and experiment.
Okay, I hear that. So I have a question for you related to something you said earlier, and you talked about how, when you had that crossroads moment, not being drafted, took a little bit of time, but eventually you decided in your mind that baseball was no longer going to be your path, and then you had to figure out your next steps. What advice do you give to leaders, or what would you minimally, what do you think about the question of when you see people are struggling, that yes, you could upskill further, yes, you could take some courses, yes, you could do XYZ, but sometimes people may not be cut out for their current role or for their industry or something similar. Do you have any particular method or approach for whether failing fast on one side / forward, or really cutting loose from the path that you were on and redirecting because you're recognizing that you're really not on the right path to begin with?
So how I look at it is, sometimes you have to take a job because you got to pay the bills. That's okay. I mean, that happens. But what you should really look for is finding a career that you're passionate about, that you're excited about, and that you're strong in, and that you can grow and evolve. And so my thoughts to, I've always told individuals, either that we coach as clients or people who work at Learnit, is if you get up in the morning and you're coming to the office or turning on Zoom these days, and you're not excited about what you're doing, then you need to go have a conversation, do a little self-reflection and think about, first of all, start off with, what is it that I don't enjoy about my job? Am I not growing? Am I not learning? Am I not challenged? Am I not supported by my manager, which is, happens quite a bit. And then once you figure out what that is, then maybe go have a conversation with your manager or somebody and see if there is a way to help point you towards your strengths, and maybe even a different position if you enjoy the company and the values that are in the company. I had a story, somebody I mentor, they work for this kind of startup real estate company and he really believed in the vision of the company and what they were doing, but he didn't enjoy working for his boss. He said the boss was never around, wasn't supportive. So instead, he went to HR and said, he had a conversation with his boss, and HR was like, I really enjoy what we do here. I believe in our purpose, but I want to go into a different role, which he did. And he's still there 3 years later. So I think you just kind of stand up for yourself and look at what the different opportunities are and what your strengths are, and try to pivot in that direction. Now, if you're a new leader, let's say, or you're thrown into a position and you're dealing with self-doubt or imposter syndrome, that's a whole different situation. And what I've done over the years, and what I've learned myself in dealing with imposter syndrome, is really, let's say you're promoted to a new position, you're not sure you belong. What I say first and foremost is, if somebody promoted you, that means they believe that you can do well in this position. So you need to believe in yourself. And my 3-step approach in dealing with imposter syndrome is, number one, is to work hard, put in the effort. I'm not saying work 10 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, but I'm saying, put in the effort, be consistent with what you do. Step number 2 is focus, have deliberate practice, focus on the areas that you're concerned with in your, whether if it's how to give a presentation or be better at delivering, a tough conversation, focus on that when you do it. And number 3, so it's work hard, focus. And number 3 is, when it's game time, learn and let go. Don't, know that you've put in the preparation, you've done everything to get you to the point, and then when it's game time and you're going into that presentation, that conversation, or that whatever it is, then just kind of don't worry about all the techniques you worked on. Just do your very best, because you've put in the effort, and let go, and don't be too hard on yourself, and learn. If it goes well, great. What can I do even better next time? If something didn't go the way you wanted to, try to address that, and try to look at all these opportunities as a learning lesson. But don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, I love it. There's so much to unpack there. The not hard on yourself is something that resonates with me for a variety of reasons. I mentioned the failed leadership piece, not that it was a full failure. There was a lot of positives, but at the end of the day, it didn't end the way I would have wanted it to. So let's call it a failure. But even recently, I do a lot of coaching, and usually the results are very positive. Very recently, though, there was an interaction with somebody. He didn't hire me, his boss did. And there was something about our interaction that bothered him, and did so in a way where it felt like all of a sudden the tables were being turned. Not that I was being accusatory of him or anything, but I was there to open his eyes to certain things. And he was like pointing out all my deficits, let's call it, or at least perceived deficits. And so that put me, on the defensive a little. And I started to think to myself, well, am I slacking off a little bit with him? What did I do wrong? Could I have done something different? And the answer is there's definitely areas for improvement. But my point is, I didn't want to wallow in it, because I felt like at the end of it, I am good at what I do. There are going to be times where I don't do as well as I do in other situations, or it might be a chemistry issue or other factors, but I'm not going to harp on it, because if I do, number one, I won't be able to help him moving forward. And number two, it's going to undermine my capacity to help others as well. And so I think that those are important. And there was one other thing that you mentioned that I have a question about, just as you're talking about Learnit and the trainings you're providing and the areas that people are looking to grow in. Just out of curiosity, what are the most popular areas? Do they tend to be more technical? Do they tend to be more transferable or soft? And what specifically would you say most either leaders or aspiring leaders really want to learn and become better at?
For us and how we work and help our customers, we work with a lot of individual contributors through mid-level managers is really our sweet spot. And I would say, well, during the pandemic, it was really, how do you help individuals move to a fully remote environment, and how, as a leader, do you lead and keep people engaged? Socially, communication, and break down silos that are now really intensified by working remotely. And then when things started opening up, then it was like, okay, back to the hybrid. So some people are in the office, some people aren't. So it was, adapting to that. I would say, so the most skills that we're really focusing on right now with our customers are how to be adaptable, how to become a better manager as a first-time manager. And a lot of that has to do with, emotional intelligence, being self-aware yourself, and being able to communicate clearly and have a purpose and a vision for your team. And and all that falls into like coaching your team, running one-on-ones. Those are really the critical points that we're seeing most of our customers need assistance on.
And I know people have asked me this, so I'm curious to get your take. What is the right balance when you aren't? It's one thing when you're in the same workspace and you're a cubicle apart, or you've got an office and you can walk down the hallway, see what your team is up to. It's another thing completely when every interaction requires logging in and you're only seeing them from the shoulders up for the most part. It's a totally different type of interaction. And certainly it can potentially compromise not only your capacity to see what people are doing, but that interconnection. What has been your advice or process to help people who have to manage a remote team or a quasi-remote team to manage properly without feeling like they're micromanaging or being overly invasive?
Great question. I think it's important as a leader to, like I said, to set clear direction, but also and provide the outcomes of what you're looking for your team. But you have to be able to give them the space and trust them to be able to do the work, and be there as support and be available for them if they need your support, but not jump in and overly micromanage and be too involved with what's going on. Unless they want your help in that area. I also think it's important. I try to, and I recommend this to our customers too, is I try to make it a habit of checking in with 3 or 4 of the individuals. We have about 70, 80 people who work at Learnit. And I just kind of want to get curious and see how things are going with them in general, right? Outside of work, because what happens outside of work can affect you in work. And so just taking the time, having conversations with individuals and really listening is helpful. And I think that if you're in a hybrid environment, one thing that I think is very difficult is to not give the people who are within your range, that you see at the cubicle next to you, more attention than the ones who are remote. I think especially if they're in the same positions, you want to be fair to everybody. So I think that's because you kind of tend to lean towards who's in your vicinity.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question though, and this is something I talk to a lot of people in your position or my position. Do you think it's going to be a challenge for the future leaders who have never had the opportunity to work in person how are they going to gain those leadership skills if 100% of their career is remote?
So it's a great question. It's actually turned the tables on me, which is nice.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer, but I do think that, I would say the overwhelming majority of the managerial skills are, if not exactly the same, very, very similar. The main difference, of course, is the touch points, the frequency, the means by which people interact with one another. I have seen personally a much greater trend to return to the office at least a few days a week. I don't know how it is in California, but where we are up in Jersey, I think most companies, even those in New York and Manhattan, where a lot of people have given up their rents and sort of left the office. Even larger corporations where COVID stayed for a much longer period of time, eventually the companies did require people to come back. So I'm not sure that I see it as being a permanent change, but I do think that, like you said before, the added awareness is critical, because you can read. What's interesting is when it comes to communication, most of the communication that we engage in is not verbally expressed. In other words, it's not our words, it's our tone, it's our inflection, it's our body positioning, our posture, all of those things. And a lot of it is hard to read over Zoom. You can't see it in the same way. And again, when I hop on a Zoom call, I'm kind of like, it's almost like as a former school leader, it's almost like a teacher who is told in advance that the principal is going to come and do an observation, as opposed to the teacher for whom the principal just walks in and does a walkthrough. The second one is much more spontaneous and gives you a clear sense of what really is going on. Whereas the first one, the teacher might be floating half the time, but all of a sudden shows up in a serious way because they're prepared. So you do want to create enough touch points where there's spontaneity and you could really experience it in the moment. And simultaneously, like you said, get to know people on a deeper level. So you have that balance between the deep dives and the regular touch points. Trust is important. There's certainly a lot to unpack. I actually have one last question for you before I do my final, standard question of the segment, and that is, tell us about your book. I want to hear who you wrote it for, at its core, what it's about, and what motivated you to write a book.
Sure. So this is my book right here. So you go, The Learn It All Leader. And my book is it's my approach to leadership. It's my spin on leadership. And it's broken into two segments. It's the being, which is the mindset, and the doing. And I think it's pretty practical. And I wrote it really first and foremost because I like helping people. I've always liked to help people, and I take what I've been able to accomplish over the years with the failures and successes, and I feel like if I can do it, a lot of other people can do it. And my approach in this book, the 4 traits that I talk about are humility, curiosity, integrity, and having courage. Having courage, what I mean is stepping out of your comfort zone and learning things and pushing yourself. And really, I'm kind of model it, like I mentioned before, after what I've learned from playing for 3 Hall of Fame baseball coaches. And then I modeled my leadership style for them and my father. And so I wrote it for people I could help, especially new leaders, but also really my definition of a leader. Let's take one step back. It's not, you don't have to manage a team of 2, 50, or 1,000. we're all leaders. We all have the ability, and it starts with self-leadership, which I think is very, very important. And so I kind of want to make sure that that's clear. Now, the second reason I wrote this book is because, my father, who was like my idol, passed away in 2010 of cancer. And I got two little kids, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I really wanted them to understand the legacy of what my father and my mom's still alive. And both of them were such supportive, great parents. And look at the difference and the impact that we've been able to make through Learnit over the years. And this is something that I think that can help them understand that better. So those are really the reasons why I wrote the book. And like I said, I think it's pretty practical with actionable areas that people can take. And like I talked about the imposter syndrome, that, little tools that you can take and immediately put into work.
Nice. Could you give me a very succinct definition of a Learnit all leader?
A Learnit all leader is someone who comes in with a beginner's mind. They don't need to be the smartest person in the world. They surround themselves with a diverse group, and they challenge their beliefs to see if there's better ways to do things, versus a know-it-all who has everything figured out. And like I like to say, I think that great leaders aren't born, they're not made, they're constantly in the making. They're constantly learning how to evolve.
Nice. Okay, you may have already answered this, but I didn't ask it explicitly, so I'm going to do it now. Share with us, please, your biggest failure and how you've grown from it.
Well, my biggest failure, I would say, going back 20 years, is we really overexpanded. And this was right around the .com days, and I was a 26-year-old CEO, and I'm like, I got this all figured out. And so we opened up other locations, even against other people said, hey, go slow. We overexpanded, and I was lucky to have my family to help support us through that. And otherwise we would have been out. But what I learned are a couple of things: is never give up. You need to keep pushing forward. But there's something I talk about in my book called purposeful awfulizing, which is when you have a very, important, tough decision, don't look at just the present and, everything rosy. Think about things a year or two out and try to really understand, what is the worst case scenario? If I make this decision, what is the worst case scenario? And if that worst case scenario happens, can we survive it? And if you can't, then you got to go back to the drawing board, take a step back and figure something else out. So that's really great question. That is really, really, really what I learned from, almost a catastrophic mistake at the very beginning.
Wow. Okay, so we're now going to transition to the rapid fire, where the answers are short and sweet. A historical figure you'd love to have lunch with.
Winston Churchill.
Nice. A skill that every leader must develop.
Listening.
Good one. A quote that you think about often.
Okay, I'm going to butcher this, but it's by Gandhi, and it's: live like today's your last day and learn like you're going to live forever. That's an important one.
Nice. I'm not familiar with that. That's certainly a good one to me. A tip to stay calm and focused.
Don't overreact.
And then finally, a productivity tip that helps you to get more done.
I wouldn't say it helps me get more done. It helps me get better, more important stuff done. Is I have what I call the big three, where I focus on what are the main things I have for the month, quarter, and then the day. And I focus on getting those done first.
Nice. Eat that frog. Okay.
Eat that frog.
So how can people connect with you? How can they learn more about you, your company, take advantage of all the good stuff you're doing? And of course, find your book.
You could find my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I really think that the best thing to do is, if you want, connect with me on LinkedIn, pretty active on LinkedIn, and at Damon Lembi. And you can look at our website for our corporate training, virtual corporate training, which is learnit.com.
I realize now that I wrote an extra rapid fire down, but I didn't include it in my list on the actual screen that I was looking at. The most famous teammate or coach you've ever had. The one that most people would recognize.
Most famous teammate.
Because I think you said 3 coaches were Hall of Famers.
Yes. Well, I could tell you, I never played with this person, but I was good friends with him for 2 years. Was Barry Bonds.
I recognize that name.
Recognize that name. And the most famous teammate I had in the summertime was a gentleman by the name of Nomar Garcia Parra. Who was a big time shortstop, phenomenal player. Played with him in the Cape Cod League a long time ago. Great question.
Wow. Okay, awesome. So, Damon, you've shared a lot. You obviously have a lot of experience, wisdom to share with all of us. And I really hope people do check you out and get your book and all of that. Leave us, please, with one final life lesson with which to wrap up our episode.
My final life lessons to wrap up our episode is I would say that we all deal with self-doubt, and that's okay. But push through it. Give yourself more credit than you tend to do. Fight your inner critic and just go for it. Have fun with it, and you'll be surprised at the results that come and successes you'll have. But you'll never know unless you try and you move forward.
Powerful. All right, Damon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on to Lead to Succeed. I've learned a lot and really ties into a lot that I'm doing. So I think I benefited tremendously, and I'm sure everybody who listens will benefit as well. Best of luck, continued success with all that you do. Keep teaching, keep learning, keep inspiring, and thank you again for being with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode and for investing in yourself so that you can lead to succeed. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Your feedback gives the show more social proof and encourages more folks to listen.